Welcome to Hospice of the Piedmont's Community Conversation. As a local, not-for-profit organization, our mission is to positively transform the way people view and experience serious illness, dying, and grief. We cannot carry out this mission without talking to you, our community. My name is Ron Cottrell, President and CEO of Hospice of the Piedmont. We all know there are two certainties in life: taxes and death. We can't do much about taxes, but we can help on the journey we will all experience, dying. Today, we'll be talking about finding your way after a life-limiting diagnosis. We are very fortunate to learn lessons from a member of our community that has been diagnosed with a life-limiting disease, Bob Kahn. Bob has had extraordinary success in his career, starting his own commercial real estate company and several entrepreneurial endeavors. He is also a committed volunteer that has helped several organizations in our community carry out their mission, improving the quality of life in our community. Bob, thank you for sharing your experience with us and with our community. We are tremendously grateful for your willingness to share the lessons you have learned on this journey. I want to let everyone know that this program is being recorded and will be on our website. So if you find things that may be helpful to share with families and friends, please go to our website and share the information with them. I want to quickly turn things over to our Chief Medical Officer at Hospice of the Piedmont, Dr. Tim Short. Dr. Short will share some details about our program today. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you learn many things as we have this community conversation. Tim, I'll turn things over to you.
Thank you, Ron. You all are in for a treat today, and I want to first of all let you know that if you have questions, we'll have a panel discussion at the end of the session. You can write them in the chat box. You won't be able to see all the questions, but we will be. And we look forward to addressing those questions in the second half of the program. Joining me for that panel discussion will be Bob Kahn, that Ron just told you about, Ashley Bergstrom, a family practice nurse practitioner who's been working in the hospice palliative care world now for 6 years or more with Hospice of the Piedmont. She started in hospice and then swam upstream and is now working in our home-based Piedmont Care palliative care program. And Dr. Michael Dobson, who's currently the fellow in palliative hospice care at the University of Virginia. And we're so glad he's going to be joining us as an associate medical director here at Hospice of the Piedmont at completion of his fellowship. I want to tell you a little bit about what you're about to see. We're going to play a film, a recording of Ashley and I speaking with Bob. And you'll see he has a very clear vision of what he wants. And he's able to speak to that in a really profound and challenging topics without fear or overwhelming emotion. I don't encounter many people that can speak as directly and honestly and authentically as Bob does in this film. What you're going to see is a condensed version of a family meeting, of a goals of care meeting that occur lots of times in the hospital setting, but it can occur at any point along the continuum of care. You will find this honest, pragmatic, practical pilgrim on a journey, and you'll be able to join him for a short while in this journey, a journey where he's aware that his children are observing him. He's aware that his friends and family are with him, and he's intent on setting his own course. Ashley knows Bob well, as she's been caring for him on an ongoing basis, and you'll hear about that sacred and trusting relationship. But this film is my first encounter with Bob, which is usually or often the case with these kinds of meetings. I didn't know Bob before. He didn't know me. We didn't give him any questions up front. We tried to make this meeting as realistic as possible without rehearsing. And, when I came into this meeting, I had no agenda other than what Bob's agenda was. I want you to make note of a few things as you listen to this. First, notice who's doing the talking in this meeting. You'll find 3/4 of the time it's Bob. And that's how we know these meetings should go. It's not always how that transpires in the medical world, but we know from research on success of family meetings, the more the patients or family members talk, the better the outcome of the meeting. I'd also invite you to notice the language, the words that are being used. Is it medical language? Is it medical language that's been translated to lay language? You might even want to jot down some of the words or metaphors that are used and particularly capture your attention. Now, just a little bit about the framework for a family meeting like this. It's very simple. It's pretty open-ended. We start with who, we move to what, and then we move to where. So we start with a family meeting with who you are as a person, what are your values, what's important to you. That's where we always want to start, and you'll see that in the progression of this meeting. Then we transition to what, and we go back to what we were all taught in medicine. The best way to start in a conversation like this is with just the open-ended questions. What's your understanding of your condition? What have the doctors explained to you? And then we pivot from what to where, and the bridge between what and where is the whole often avoided issue of prognosis. Where do we go from here? What is the prognostic outlook? What are your treatment options? Where do you want this to go? How do you want your care to be shaped, informed, and directed going forward? This is not a meeting where a medical team explains what's going on and what your options are and then says, what do you want to do or what do you not want to do? This is actually a pivot point where we move from building medical care around your life to, or we move towards building medical care around your life rather than you building your life around your medical care. So let's watch this together with those invitations to take notice.
Bob, over the last several months, I have had the honor to be a member of your care team and to hear some of your story as you've been navigating some of the challenges that go along with a serious illness. And today I have the privilege of being present while you share your story with my colleague, Dr. Tim Short. And I just want to express my gratitude for the opportunity to be here and for your generosity and willingness to share your experience with others.
Absolutely, my pleasure. And you know, I've so appreciated the care that you and concern that you have shown me. You know, it's been an amazing journey, and you have played a really important role for me. So thank you.
Well, Bob, I've looked at your chart. I've talked with Ashley. I know a lot about your medical condition, but I don't know about you. And I think sometimes in medicine, we can be lured into treating labs and x-rays and CTs and lose sight of the person. And that's what's important to us is what's most important to you. So would you mind if we just start by, if I could ask you, tell us a little bit about yourself. What's important to you in this journey so far, and especially in looking forward in this?
Yeah, so I'm a 65-year-old man who, you know, it's May now, May of 2021. In December of 2020, I was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And leading up to that, And then through the diagnosis, I lost a great deal of weight and strength. And so my lifestyle, which I would regularly hike 7 to 10 miles in the Blue Ridge Mountains and travel and enjoy food and drink, changed dramatically. Now, I highly prioritize family and friends and just enjoying every day. And, honestly, I have this, terminal diagnosis, but I'm enjoying my life, and so, yeah, and so that's my priority, is to try to make the most of every day.
So there's been some physical diminishments, but there's been this kind of migration from independence and out and about to relationships. It sounds like the relationships that are important to you. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, mostly, yes, but that's generally correct. So the amount of love that I have felt since my diagnosis has been overwhelming, both from my children, from my family, and then from my circle of friends. And that's been amazing. When we're healthy and we're leading busy lives, you get snippets of that, of course. But, now the conversations I have go very deep. And it's been fascinating to learn in great depth what is going on in other people's lives. So that's been wonderful. I have now begun to rebuild some travel by car to other states into my life. So I am getting out and traveling a little bit. And then I'll be taking my 2 children out west next week, actually, the end of next week. So that's going to be unique. We'll be fishing and exploring the Grand Teton area, and then I have another trip out to Colorado in early July. So I'm rebuilding that into my life. So I have been feeling quite well, not perfect. You get fatigued, as you all know, and was certain that the cancer was under some degree of control. And then 4 weeks ago, I went in for my first CT scan after after the chemo has started. So the chemo had been going on for about 2 months. And I was certain it was going to come back with some positive results. Well, I was shocked that the cancer had continued to spread, not dramatically, but I thought for sure, it was in remission, I guess is the proper term.
Mm-hmm.
And that was greatly demoralizing. This is a roller coaster journey. Mm-hmm. And that really knocked me back psychologically for about a week or so. And then, but I continue to this day, 4 4 weeks later to feel good. Most days. I mean, and even when I'm having a not so great day, I don't feel all that bad. So I just kind of changed my way of thinking about things, and, decided that, well, my metric is how am I feeling, not what the scan says. Tomorrow, I have my follow-up scan. So while I'm hopeful it'll show some positive progress against the cancer, it's hard to be optimistic after what happened with my first scan. So, yeah, so that's where things stand today as we sit here.
Yeah. I wonder if we might talk a little bit about prognosis.
Whatever you like.
What is your understanding about that? What's been the depth of conversations you've had around that?
Right. So I understand this to be a terminal illness. That's been very clear. In a very initial meeting with my first oncologist, he said that I had, and this was back in January, so 4 months ago, 5 months ago, 4 months ago. He said without treatment, I probably have 3 months to live. And at that time, I was still in a lot of pain, and so I was presenting a lot worse than I am now. But nonetheless, I don't know if that really factored into what he was thinking. He said I had 3 months to live if I didn't go through treatment. And if I did, it would be something longer than that, maybe 15 or 16 months. But I actually, so anyway, that's the answer to your question. I mean, I don't actually focus on that because, it's an unknown, and I'll deal with the deterioration in my health when I have to. Did that answer your question? I'm not sure if it did or...
Well, for some people, it's a looming question that never gets talked about. And it is the elephant in the room.
Yes.
For others, it's a challenge because we're so poor at it. Even when we talk about it, we can't give specifics, kind of like you said, sometime more than 3 months, 16 to 18, who knows?
Right.
You said something that I think is really important to resurface, and that was, you had a setback for a week or so when your CAT scan didn't show improvement.
Yeah.
And that was really hard because you were weighing that as the judge of how you're doing. And then you reframed it to say, I'm going to use for my metrics how I'm feeling.
Exactly.
And you actually landed in the right place when it comes to prognostic prediction. When you look at all the literature, your prognosis is going to be determined by your response to this clinical trial. I mean, that's going to impact how long you live. But in general, what we know about prognostic predictors is there are 3 factors that are the most important road signs for you to monitor to see how you're doing. And they all speak to how you feel. They are function, nutrition, and mental capacity. And you're doing well in those domains. I know you've lost weight, I know you've lost muscle mass, you've changed there, but you've remained independent and functionally intact here. Certainly cognitively intact. Those are actually the road signs they're more important than CAT scans.
Interesting.
So you've landed in the right space on how to manage that. Now, I know your oncologist is still going to do those still are important markers, but they need to be put into that context. There's a lot of literature that I've just oversimplified that speaks to that. There are 3 other factors in our experience, and you feel free to add in here, because you know Bob well, that I think trump the proven predictors of nutrition, function, and mental capacity. One is the will to live. And you've got that in spades. And these are wild cards that are hard to quantitate, but they really weigh a lot in this journey, I think.
May I interrupt you? Because when I was in a lot of pain for 2 months, I seriously considered taking my own life because it's not the way I wanted to live. And but now I have a very strong will to live. I'm glad I didn't take my own life. I was very close. And so go on, please.
Yeah. Well, the second is meaning and purpose. And that is very much relates to what you've talked about as love. You know, loving others and being loved and the meaning and the purpose that offers you in your life. And the third is caregiving, is the people around you supporting you, like Ashley, like your friends, your family. Your journey is going to go longer because you've had such wonderful support. Your pain management is a good example of that. You were on a thin, thin ice then, thinking about this is it, I don't want to live this way. And somebody stepped in and helped you with that, or several stepped in and helped you with that. And here you are on a much longer horizon in front of you. So those things are, again, they're hard to quantitate, but you've got those in spades. So I put my nickel that you've got a lot more living left to do.
Great,
And
great.
I think you're doing it well by living it in this moment.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. You know, I live alone, and you know, my oldest child, Tyler, took it on his own when I started to go into this relentless pain cycle, just to move in here with me, and that was never expected. And he lived here with me for several months, and that was amazing. It was amazing, and then I started to get better, and I said, you know what, I want to try living on my own again. And so I've been on my own again for, I don't know, 6 weeks. You know, you lose track of time, but that gesture, I mean, that dedication, that devotion. There's been a lot of blessings from this experience, and they all revolve around the love and concern of family and friends. I mean, it's, you know, you just don't, you know, as I said earlier, you know, you go about your daily lives and everybody's interacting, and it's, you know, everything is, you know, moving at a faster pace, and then when things like this happen, it's just, you get to experience this richness of, you know, of the relationships that surround you, and it's a beautiful thing. So it's, you know, I mean, as strange as it sounds, it's been, you know, an amazing journey in that way, and so yeah, it's been, yeah, I'm very lucky. I'm very lucky. Yeah, I mean, that's the way I look at it. I mean, so.
Well, that is, I guess, the gift when you're staring down the barrel of mortality like this. What's laid bare is what's important.
Yeah.
And what's not important kind of drifts off to the sides.
That's very true.
You know, I think our model in medicine that you've been on has been a model where we've said, Bob, here's your disease, here's the treatment of your disease, now you build your life around it. And going forward, if your disease and when your disease progresses, you get more compromised, more frail, more vulnerable, that model's going to have to shift to, okay, Bob, what's important to you, and let's build your treatment around it. It's the exact opposite. Can you help us understand what are going to be those pillars that we should design your care around?
I don't want to be spending time in a hospital. I know that for sure. So care that's centered around my home, or if I'd have to move into a hospice facility, but would be okay. But I really want to be at home. This is where I'm comfortable, and so that's very, very important to me. I also understand from hearing, the few stories that I hear about, the cancer experience, that a lot of people find themselves going to an emergency. A lot of people who are on a cancer journey, they find themselves going to an emergency room from time to time. And that's like the last thing I'd want to do. I don't think you all can help me with that. But being at home and home care, that's huge. That's huge, yeah.
Fear is often what contracts people and paralyzes people from this work. And yet you haven't succumbed to that. What's given you strength and what's led you to this space, Bob?
Yeah, so I'm a very practical person. And when I understood what my diagnosis meant, it's baked in. And so, throughout my life, there are things that, you get into a car accident and, there's no sense in fretting about it because it's done. There's no going back in time. And kind of, it's kind of like that with the cancer diagnosis. There it is. And so, how do you want to live the rest of whatever your time frame is? And so this is it. This is my journey, and I want to live my life to the fullest. And it's also my legacy, because my children are observing how I'm going through this process, as are, of course, my extended family and friends. But so it's it's part of building my legacy, that okay, let's enjoy what we have, and continue to make this world a better place. So I'm deeply involved with the Salvation Army, and Rotary, and I can continue to make the world a better place, in my own little way.
Yeah.
And I never even considered, but I didn't want my journey to be one of fear. And again, as I said earlier, I don't fear dying. I've never feared dying. I do fear ending up in a hospital and losing control of my life. That I fear.
Well, maybe that's a good note to close on, because I've sat in a lot of meetings with families about planning and care planning, etc. I've sat facilitating them, and I've sat as a guest with other physicians and team members facilitating them. And more often than not, they're us talking. And we're talking medical language, and we're explaining medical things, and then we're turning to you and say, what do you want to do? And there's been very little medical language in this conversation. On the contrary, we've heard about love, We've heard about living in the present. We've heard about hope. We've heard about relationships and their importance. We've heard about independence and that, hey, I know I'm dying. I know I have a limited life expectancy, but I'm living while I'm dying. And that piece is exactly where I think the conversation needs to be centered, not in the medical language. And I, underneath all of this, and you certainly have brought this to surface, but you two together, I think, are figuring it out going forward. And it is a real privilege. You used the word honor to sit and look at this and bear witness to the humanism of this, of what it means to be present, one human heart speaking to another human heart, and more importantly, listening to a human heart. So I know you've been heard by this beautiful heart over here, and I know, as you spoke before, what a privilege it is to be trusted in that way. So thank you for that, Bob.
Well, thank you all, because you've made the journey a lot easier. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry about that technical glitch, folks. I was just saying thank you to Bob, and I'm sure you join me in teaching us what it means to live more fully by really stepping into this space with such grace, with such courage, and not alone. He's drawn others into this space. He's allowed others in, and he's protected those that he loves so much in this space along the way as well. It is one of the reasons why it's such a privilege to work in this field. What we learn about living in your simple legacy, Bob, of, enjoying what you have and making the world just a little bit of a better place. Um, that's what it boils down to here, doesn't it? I wonder, Bob, in your listening to this again and looking at it, if there's anything that you said, oh, I wish I'd said this, oh, I'd like to add that, or any other message that kind of surfaced or that you would want to underscore for listeners right now.
No, I was happy with the words that were expressed. I will tell you that shortly after that was recorded, I began to feel not well again. And so, as I mentioned in the video, it is a roller coaster. and I had developed edema where my calves and feet were swollen. That freaked me out because I like to hike, and it was like, whoa. And then some of the original cancer symptoms returned. And so the real challenge I found was, or I find, was to continue to lift yourself up and maintain a very positive outlook about life and your journey. And that can be quite challenging, but then things start to mitigate and the sun comes out again, and you begin, as I have more recently, the last week or so, to enjoy things again. And so it's a challenge, this journey, but maintaining love of life and enjoyment of life, I think, is very important, and it just feels very natural to me.
Yeah. Well, I know you've, when we've spoken otherwise, the palliative support has been really important to you, just in trying to offer you more mountains than valleys, or at least keep you on an even ground. And there's a lot of confusion about palliative and hospice and what's what. Actually, I wonder if you might give us an explanation. What's the difference between palliative care and hospice?
Yeah, I would be happy to. I think that's a really important question because the two get conflated a lot. Both of them have very similar focus. Both of them are focused on assistance with symptom management, optimization of comfort, and stress reduction with an advanced illness. So there's a lot of overlap there. I think the main difference or major difference is that hospice is a specific Medicare or insurance benefit. So along with that, it has eligibility criteria, you enroll into it, and it has many, many, many covered services. And I think generally with hospice, people are signing on to hospice when they are no longer seeking curative treatment for their advanced illness, and their goals of care are focused really on comfort only. Palliative care can start more upstream, as you said earlier. We can start at the time of diagnosis with an advanced illness. There aren't the eligibility criteria in place. It's the way that Piedmont Care works is we're a consultative service. So I visit in consultation with your primary care provider to provide symptom management recommendations, and I can visit in the home or in other settings and nursing facilities. And I can also assist, I think, one thing that's important is I'm happy to assist with discussions if it's desired about when hospice could be appropriate, and to help with that transition if and when that's appropriate for the person or their family.
Yeah, thanks, Ashley. I'll also add that this attention to symptom management and optimizing quality of life actually has been demonstrated to help people live longer. The best way when you have a disease that's not curable, like Bob has, the best way to help him live as long as possible is to help him live as well as possible. And that's precisely why palliative will come alongside of a cardiologist who's managing the heart failure, but we're managing the depression, the anxiety, the insomnia, the shortness of breath, or a nephrologist that's managing the kidney problems, but we're managing the spasm and the itching, or the cancer oncologist that's managing the disease progression, but we're managing the nausea or the pain, etc. When you do both of those, people do better. And they stay out of the hospital, like is important to Bob and many, many others. I'd like to ask all the panelists this next question that came in. I'll start with you though, Michael. this person asks what you would recommend to those of us who have friends who have such a diagnosis. How do we approach them? How do we address their difficulties or stay light and friendly? How do we be friends, good friends to them in that space? I'll start with you, Michael, and then Ashley, I'd love to hear your response, and Bob, yours as well.
So I think that's a really good question, because it can be really difficult, and a lot of people might not want to have those conversations and might be avoiding them. So like you had mentioned earlier, Tim, I think I would start with a lot of open-ended questions and not really having an agenda for how you think they should be doing things, but I would check in and ask, how are they doing? How have things changed recently? How are they thinking about the future in that sort of open way where you're not kind of trying to give them your own opinions about exactly what you think should be done with what's going on.
Good. So sounds like you want to meet them where they are. So you ask the open-ended questions to find that out and then join them there first. That's what I'm hearing you say, Michael. Ashley, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think Michael said that beautifully. And I think, Bob initially reached out to Piedmont Care because of a friend. I think that our friends are essential. They guide us. They are our most trusted allies. But it is really important to make sure that our advice is wanted, and that it's not necessarily advice. It's asking for guidance about what can I help you with as your friend? Are you looking for resources that I can help to provide you?
Yeah. Bob, what would you tell if you were speaking to your friends or to this person who has a friend? What advice would you give them?
Well, people are so kind, and when they see you in a social setting, they want to talk with you and express their concern, but sometimes they just don't know what to say. And so a good conversation starter is, how are you feeling today? The today being the operable word, because things change. I mean, as I mentioned just a short time ago. So that's a great way to start, and then go on from there.
Yeah. I think the common theme that we're hearing, and we hear this from people dealing with serious illness, is you follow their lead. You meet them where they are and allow them to lead. Give them the space. There are some days where they just want a normal day, and they just want to be treated normally and not have this looming over every minute of their day. And there's other days when they need to go deep, and they need to process, and they need to feel, and they need to let the feelings hit them down. And you can't determine that for them. You just have to follow where they lead you there. Excellent. Well, I wonder, Bob, if there's, because there's lots of well-intended people with advice that they want to give, encouragement that they want to give, but might not land correctly. I wonder if you've experienced anything like that in your journey so far, and how do you deal with that? How do you cope with that?
That's a great question, because the people around you they're deeply concerned about you, and they want to help, and they will offer up all kinds of advice in terms of eating and appropriate self-care, and it can be overwhelming, especially in the beginning when you're just trying to decipher, whoa, what has happened in my life and how do I go forward? So that it can be a little bit overwhelming over time as, the diagnosis sets in amongst everyone, and your friends and family particularly your family, are on a journey with you because they're so deeply concerned about you that they are dealing with their own wide set of emotions. So it's important to listen to what people have to say, but in the end, it's really the cancer patient's journey, and I think it's important that the way that they want to move their path forward be respected, and this is not easy. This is not an easy journey, but for both family and the cancer patient. But we need to be good listeners, and we need to be good at shepherding everyone along.
Yeah, thank you. Michael, I'd like to start with this next question with you. Do you have any advice when the patient's in significant pain and unable to take in nutrition? What do you do in that setting?
I guess first thing to do is ask for some help. I hope people aren't trying to figure all this stuff out on their own. And so reach out to whoever you can, maybe family first, and then like your primary care doctor, and then somebody like with Hospice of the Piedmont here. We have lots of different tools and tricks to get around that. But I guess that would be the first thing, is try and reach out, get some help, and figure out a little bit more about what's going on. Why are we not taking in nutrition? Why are we not able to? I think some digging into that would help figure out the answer, and that might need some help, some expert and professional help.
Good. Ashley, do you want to add? Yeah, I see you shaking your head. You would agree with that. Ask for help. There's help out there, and expertise. I think also it raises the important concept of the multiple dimensions of pain. That pain is oftentimes, there's physical dimensions, but there's also emotional dimensions, spiritual dimensions, relational dimensions. And I think we have to address pain from that holistic viewpoint. When it's physical, we've got a lot of, like Michael was saying, a lot of tools in the toolbox, and we'll pull them all out for you. And pain in that setting can be all-consuming, and we know when it gets so bad that it interferes with nutritional intake, bad things happen then. You start on a pretty rapid slide. Bob, did you experience, I know you had some terrible pain for a while. Did it compromise you so much that you weren't eating and drinking and start you on that slide?
Well, what I found was that I was getting punished for eating. So 15 minutes after I would eat, I would just go into the cycle of pain. So you lose your incentive to eat. And certainly it impacts your muscle mass and your weight, and psychologically it's also devastating. So in my case, I was lucky that with the help of others and also with Ashley, we were able to find the right cocktail of pain medications to tamp down the pain, and that's when I started to reemerge as a healthier human being and someone who was hungry. So I started eating again, and so yeah, I mean it's a problem.
Bob, somebody asked, how your trip out west went. If you've been on that now, and did any of this give you concerns or angst in traveling? Were there resources that you would have had available? Where do you turn if you got into trouble out west? How did it impact that trip? Or did it?
Well, I mean, there is a degree of anxiety as the trip approaches. How are you going to be feeling? What are you going to do if all of a sudden you're not feeling well? And so I took my basket of meds with me in case things flared up again. But in this case, I was quite fortunate because I was feeling quite well when we were traveling, and I actually did quite a bit of hiking, which was very gratifying, and had some wonderful meals. So, but traveling with the meds gave me a sense of security in case I needed them.
Yeah. So it helped to be prepared. You knew you had in your toolbox what you might need, and you knew how to use it if you needed to pull it out. Yeah. Michael, I wonder if I could ask you, you've seen a lot of family meetings in this last year. You've seen some good ones, I'm sure. You've seen some that weren't quite so good. And I'm wondering, do medical students, do doctors get trained on how to facilitate these conversations? Is this in their curriculum? Do they come out equipped to help people in these conversations?
So I would say it varies in how well prepared people are. I think that the sort of general requirements are sort of so limited that unfortunately a lot of people go through medical training and don't get a lot of experience in doing this kind of work. There's some required exposure to these types of things, to end of life experiences and family meetings and that, but it can be pretty limited, and depends a little bit on where you are, but I think also depends on how maybe motivated you are as a learner. So there are great opportunities out there if you are interested in this, and that's why there are so many people who are very good at it. And I will say it's growing, it's catching on, and throughout probably the world, more and more people are getting better at this and teaching other people, so that more people can get access to this good kind of care.
Yeah, thank you. Somebody asked the question of how what we've been talking about is different than the Gunderson Advanced Care in Wisconsin model, and this is a great question. There's a lot of growing attention placed on advanced care planning. And Gunderson Lutheran in La Crosse, Wisconsin has an over 95% rate of completion of advanced directives in the whole community, the whole town. And so they're the country's leader in this initiative. What's striking about the research on advanced care directives is there's a disconnect when you complete them and then you look at what care is rendered at the end of life. They don't always line up. They don't always protect what care you want to receive at end of life. And it's not because the doctors aren't listening to this and they're doing what they wanted to at the end of life. It's because people change their minds at the end of life. When fear creeps in and contaminates decisions, it changes what you said you would do hypothetically upstream. I was really disheartened by those studies, and they've been replicated in the patient population with dialysis that are stopping dialysis, with a malignant brain tumor, a GBM, and found that both those populations that are fairly predictable populations, we found that finding. But Bud Hammis, the guy that started all of that in La Crosse, the way he interpreted these studies is, it doesn't mean we should lose heart in doing advanced care planning. It's the opposite. When you come into that frightening space, when you're really looking at your own mortality, if you've been practiced and you've had several conversations and you've done reflective internal work yourself, you're going to make better decisions at the end of life if you've had that process upstream, particularly if you've had your family members join you in that process. And I would say that as we draw this session to a close, if this has struck you like it has struck me, I would stick it up on Facebook and encourage people to watch it with their families, so they can have that important discussion of what's important to me, what's a definition of quality of life that I would find acceptable, and I would be willing to go through some treatment if it's going to land me with that definition of quality of life. I think we could all find ourselves better practiced when we are, because we're all going to be confronted, and step into the space that Bob has so beautifully led us into in this last hour. Bob, I really want to thank you for your forthrightness, for your wisdom, for your courage. And I want to thank your family and your friends and those that are along the journey, including Ashley, because I know there's times when you're leaning on them. But in this last hour, we've all gleaned from you the beauty of life and the richness of relationships, and that love meets us in this present moment, right here and right now, just as it fills you when you let yourself. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm going to turn back to Ron Cottrell to close us here then. Ashley and Michael, thank you also for joining us on the panel and for sharing your wisdom.
These community conversations are designed to break the tyranny of silence that often happens when we face death, dying, and this subject. And thank you so much for joining us to engage in this conversation, to be able to have transparent dialogue on what we can do when we face a life-limiting diagnosis. I have to thank Bob. Bob, your commitment to this community for many, many years has been tremendous. And this legacy that you're building to help share your story is a tremendous gift to all of us. Thank you for that. Tim, Ashley, Michael, thank you for sharing your expertise. I also have to thank all of my colleagues at Hospice of the Piedmont for the work that you do every day in caring for patients, to our volunteers and to our donors that lets us connect with our community to support those patients and families when facing the end of life. We're going to continue to have these conversations. Our next community conversation will be early in the fall, and we'll let you know when that happens. Your engagement in this conversation to bring this topic of serious illness, dying, and grief to our community is just so important. So thank you for joining us today. Thank you for your good questions, and we look forward to seeing you again in the early fall for Hospice of the Piedmont's next community conversation. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.